In the bitter cold of the Siberian tundra, a strange anomaly pierced the night sky, drawing long, fiery streaks across the stark expanse. Nikolai Ivanov, a reclusive geologist, squinted into the darkness from the doorstep of his small cabin. His interest piqued by the unexpected celestial event. He grabbed his coat and Geiger counter, preparing for a quick investigation. The ground trembled slightly underfoot as he approached the site, a fresh crater gouged into the frozen soil a few kilometers from his home. Smoke and steam rose from the center where a small, spherical object lay embedded. It was unlike any meteorite Nikolai had ever seen, coated in a material that shimmered with an iridescent sheen under his flashlight. Suddenly, a panel on the object shifted, startling him. Crouched low, he watched as a figure emerged, a slender form wrapped in a shimmering cloak. The figure stumbled, then regained balance, surveying the quiet desolation of the Siberian wilderness. "Who are you?" Nikolai called out, his Russian accent thick under the tension. "Are you hurt?" The figure turned, revealing features that were undeniably human-like, yet strikingly different. Her eyes, a vivid shade of cerulean, studied him intently. She responded in a language he couldn't understand, melodic yet sharp. Nikolai approached slowly, hands raised to show he meant no harm. "I am Nikolai. You are safe here. Do you need help?" Understanding seemed to flicker in her eyes. She repeated, this time in broken Russian. "Help. Yes, I need hide." "Okay, you can hide at my cabin. It's safe there." He gestured for her to follow. "Can you walk?" She nodded, clutching her cloak tightly around her as they walked back to his cabin. Inside, the warmth of the fire seemed to ease some of her tension. Nikolai offered her a cup of tea, which she inspected curiously before taking a tentative sip. "What is your name?" "Where are you from?" Nikolai asked, trying to piece together the situation. "Ayala," she said simply. "I am from... not here. Not your world." "An alien?" The word felt strange on his lips, but nothing else made sense. "You were sent here?" Ayala's gaze dropped. "Exiled. I am... punished." Nikolai's mind raced. An alien, exiled to Earth, found in Siberia. It was the stuff of science fiction, yet here she was, very real and very frightened. "You are safe with me, Ayala. No one will find you here." She looked up, eyes glimmering with unshed tears. "Thank you, Nikolai." As the fire crackled, Nikolai watched the alien girl. She seemed lost in thought, likely pondering her fate. He wondered what series of events had led her to his remote corner of the world. It was clear she was far from the menace many imagined aliens to be. She was just someone, not something, seeking safety. "I will help you, Ayala. Tomorrow we will figure out what to do next," he promised, settling into an uneasy silence. The night outside grew deeper and colder, but inside the cabin felt a bit warmer with two unlikely companions sharing the quiet solitude of exile. The next morning, the dim Siberian sunlight barely seeped through the heavy clouds, casting a gloomy light inside Nikolai's modest cabin. Ayala sat quietly at the wooden table, her presence an ethereal contrast to the rustic surroundings. Nikolai busied himself preparing a simple breakfast of kasha and eggs, watching her curiously as she explored the small space with her eyes. "Did you sleep?" he asked, placing a plate in front of her. Ayala nodded, a slight smile touching her lips. "Yes, thank you. It's quiet here, different, peaceful." Nikolai grinned, sitting across from her. "It's the most peaceful place I know. Now eat something. You'll need your strength." They ate in silence for a few minutes before Nikolai decided to broach the more pressing questions that had plagued him all night. "Ayala, can you tell me more about why you were exiled? I need to understand how much danger we might be in." Ayala set down her fork, her expression turning solemn. "I was a healer on Zorath. My people were governed by those who seek to expand our territories, to conquer. I opposed this, the war. I spoke out against it. So they sent you here as punishment?" Nikolai tried to keep his tone neutral, aware of the sensitivity. "Yes," she replied. "Exile here is considered a death sentence. They thought Earth's environment would kill me, that I would be alone, unable to survive." Nikolai's brow furrowed. "But why Earth? Why not just imprison you?" Ayala's eyes darkened. "Earth is remote, primitive in their eyes. It's meant to be a disgrace, a place for the unwanted. No Zorathian expects to find life worth integrating with here. They underestimate your world." He nodded, understanding the insult implied by her people's actions. You are safe here, Ayala, and you're not alone now. We'll figure this out together. After breakfast, Nikolai proposed a walk outside to discuss their next steps in the open, away from the confines of the cabin. The crisp air felt refreshing, and the vastness of the tundra provided a semblance of freedom that the walls of the cabin did not. As they walked, Nikolai pointed to the various flora and explained their uses. These berries are edible, he said, handing her a small red fruit. Ayala examined it curiously before tasting it. We have something similar on Zorath, but not for eating. We use them for their healing properties. Nikolai looked at her with interest. You were a healer, you said. Could you teach me some of your methods? Perhaps there's something here that could be useful to you as well. Her face lit up at the idea. I would like that very much. I have knowledge to share, Nikolai, and I sense that you do too. They spent the afternoon discussing plants, Nikolai fascinated by Ayala's insights into their medicinal properties, a surprising intersection of their worlds. It wasn't long before they felt more like colleagues than two strangers from different planets. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the snowy landscape, Nikolai realized that despite the danger, Ayala's arrival might have brought him something he hadn't known he'd been missing. A purpose beyond his geological studies. Together, they could perhaps make a stand against whatever might come their way, bonded by a shared desire to protect and learn from each other. By the time Nikolai and Ayala returned to the cabin, the short day was already giving way to the long Arctic night. Inside, Nikolai stoked the fire, casting warm light across the rough-hewn interior, while Ayala prepared a small area for her experiments with the local flora. This will be our little laboratory, she said with a hint of excitement in her voice as she arranged some of the plants and makeshift tools on an old table. Nikolai watched her with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. I never thought my cabin would turn into a cross-species research station, he chuckled. It's more than that, Ayala replied, her eyes meeting his. It's a sanctuary. The gravity of her words settled between them. Indeed, this simple cabin was now a sanctuary, not just from the physical elements of the harsh Siberian wilderness, but from the threats that loomed beyond Earth's atmosphere. Nikolai pulled up a chair beside her. Tell me more about your world, Ayala. What is it like? Ayala paused, a somber shadow crossing her features. Zorath is beautiful, much like Earth, but different. We have vast oceans that glow with bioluminescence and mountains that reach into the clouds. But it's marred by conflict, driven by a government that values expansion over peace. As she spoke, Nikolai could hear the pain in her voice, the loss of her home weighing heavily on her. He reached out, placing a comforting hand over hers. You are brave to stand against them, Ayala. Braver than many on Earth would be. She smiled weakly, squeezing his hand in gratitude. Perhaps. But bravery feels different when you are far from the fight, safe in a hideout like this. There are different kinds of fights and different kinds of bravery, Nikolai reasoned. Surviving, learning, sharing knowledge, these are also acts of resistance. Their conversation drifted into plans for the next day. Nikolai suggested setting up remote sensors around the cabin perimeter, a precaution against unexpected visitors, either human or otherwise. With Ayala's advanced understanding of technology, she improvised a simple surveillance network using parts from her escape pod. The project kept them busy through the evening, providing a distraction from their heavier thoughts. As they worked, Ayala explained the technology's workings, and Nikolai adapted his own knowledge of Earth-based tech to integrate with hers. By nightfall, their modest defense system was operational. Nikolai felt a surge of pride, not just in their technical accomplishment, but in the partnership that was forming. They were two vastly different beings united by circumstance and a shared goal of safeguarding this unlikely sanctuary. Later, as they sat by the fire, Nikolai shared stories of his youth in Russia, of vast cold landscapes and the resilience of its people. Ayala listened intently, her fascination with human culture growing with each tale. It seems, Ayala mused as she looked around the cozy cabin, that Earth and Zorath aren't so different after all. Both have beauty and harshness, peace and conflict. Nikolai nodded. Yes, and perhaps one more thing in common. A hope for better days, rooted in the actions of the few who dare to dream of peace. Their shared laughter echoed softly in the cabin, a simple sound that felt like a small victory against the looming challenges outside. In this small wooden structure, they had not only created a hideout but a home, a place where two worlds unexpectedly intertwined, offering each other solace and strength. The sun barely peeked over the horizon, casting a pale light that hinted at the long Siberian day ahead. Nikolai and Ayala started their morning with a brief check of the sensors they had set up the previous night, relieved to find no activity around their secluded cabin. "Seems we're still off the radar," Nikolai noted with a cautious optimism as they headed back inside. "Let's keep it that way as long as we can," Ayala agreed, her mind already shifting to the day's plans. Over breakfast, they mapped out a learning schedule. Nikolai was eager to dive deeper into the integration of Ayala's advanced knowledge with Earth's technologies, while Ayala was equally keen to learn more about human society, its languages, and cultures. "First, some Russian," Nikolai proposed, pulling out an old dusty book from his shelf. "It's not just about the words, it's the door to understanding the soul of a place." Ayala absorbed each lesson with an intense focus, repeating phrases with a near-perfect accent. "Your language is complex but beautiful," she remarked, her mind cataloging each new word with precision. In turn, Ayala shared more about her own world's technologies, how her people harnessed energy from their planet's natural bioluminescence, and the way they used quantum entanglement for communication. Nikolai listened, fascinated, jotting down notes and sketches. "We could try some basic experiments with bioluminescence," he suggested, excited by the potential of such a project. The afternoon was spent outside, where Ayala showed Nikolai how to identify which local plant species could be used in creating natural remedies. "Many of these plants have counterparts on Zorath with similar properties," she explained, pointing out a fern-like plant. "We used it to treat inflammation." Nikolai watched in awe as she prepared a paste from the plant, demonstrating its use. "You're not just a healer, you're a walking encyclopedia of your world," he joked, his admiration for her growing. As the day waned, they sat by a small fire outside the cabin, Nikolai teaching Ayala how to make a traditional Russian dish. "Cooking is another form of culture," he explained as they mixed ingredients. Ayala was quick to catch on, her earlier lessons in Russian helping her understand the instructions more deeply. "This is good," she admitted, tasting their creation. "Cooking might be universal," Nikolai smiled. "Some things are like music, art, and food. They're universal languages." The evening closed with Ayala sharing music from Zorath. The sounds were otherworldly, yet oddly harmonious with the human ear. "It's beautiful," Nikolai said, genuinely moved. "It's strange how music can make you feel at home, even if it's from another galaxy." They ended their day back inside the cabin, Ayala's music still playing softly in the background. Nikolai reflected on their unique situation. Two beings from different worlds, finding common ground and learning from each other against the backdrop of a cold and remote Siberian landscape. "Today was a good day," he finally said, his voice soft but filled with a warm certainty. Ayala nodded, her eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. "Yes, a very good day. Thank you, Nikolai." Their shared experiences were weaving a strong bond between them, one that was built on mutual respect and a burgeoning friendship. In the isolation of Siberia, under the watchful eye of the stars, they were not just teacher and student, but also companions facing an uncertain future together. As Nikolai and Ayala settled into their daily routine of research and exploration, the tranquil existence they had carved out in the Siberian wilderness began to attract unwanted attention. Rumors of a mysterious meteor that had landed nearby and the occasional sighting of unfamiliar lights in the sky had sparked local curiosity and drawn the attention of more distant observers. One frosty morning, while returning from a foraging trip, Nikolai noticed a set of unfamiliar tracks leading away from their cabin. His heart sank as he realized the implications. Their location was compromised. He hurried back, alerting Ayala to the potential threat. "We need to be more careful," Nikolai said, scanning the horizon with binoculars. "I think someone might be watching us." Ayala, who had been sitting at the makeshift lab table compiling notes on the local flora, looked up, her expression turning serious. "Do you think it's the government or someone else?" "It could be anyone at this point," Nikolai replied grimly. "But I suspect it might be government agents. They have the resources and the reason to investigate phenomena like this." Deciding they couldn't take any chances, they began to implement counter-surveillance measures. Nikolai taught Ayala how to mask their tracks and camouflage their activities, while Ayala set up a series of low-tech alarm systems around the perimeter of the cabin using string and cans. Their precautions seemed to work for a few days, until a more direct confrontation forced them into action. A small drone, barely visible against the gray sky, was spotted circling above the cabin one afternoon. Ayala, using a rudimentary jamming device she had cobbled together from spare parts, managed to bring it down. "This is getting serious," Nikolai observed as he dismantled the drone. "They're using military-grade tech. It's only a matter of time before they come in person." They decided to pack up the most essential supplies and prepare for a quick departure. That night, under the cover of darkness, they left the cabin, heading towards a previously scouted hideout deeper in the forest. As they navigated through the dense trees, Ayala looked back at the little cabin that had been their sanctuary. "It feels like we're leaving a part of ourselves behind," she whispered. Nikolai nodded, feeling the weight of their situation. "Sometimes we have to let go of the past to protect our future. We'll find a new place, one that's even safer." Their journey through the night was fraught with tension, but the hope of finding a new refuge kept them moving forward. As dawn broke, they reached a secluded glen that Nikolai had discovered during his surveys. It was well hidden and had access to a clean water source, a perfect new base. "We'll make our stand here," Nikolai decided, setting down his backpack. "We'll build better defenses, and we'll be ready for them this time." Ayala, setting up a small tent, smiled in agreement. "Together, we can face anything." Their resolve solidified, Nikolai and Ayala prepared for the challenges ahead, knowing that their journey was far from over. But with each other's support, they felt ready to confront whatever dangers lay in store, united in their determination to preserve their freedom and continue their mission. After the unsettling news of the relentless pursuit, Nikolai and Ayala decided it was no longer safe to stay in one place. With hurried preparations, they packed essential supplies and dismantled any trace of their technological experiments that could be traced back to Ayala's alien origins. The chill of the pre-dawn Siberian air bit at their faces as they loaded the last of their belongings into Nikolai's old, rugged jeep. "We need to keep moving. Change locations frequently," Nikolai explained, as he checked the map for remote areas less likely to draw attention. As they drove through the desolate landscape, Ayala kept scanning the horizon, her senses heightened to any sign of pursuit. "They will not give up easily," she said, her voice tense. "The bounty hunter sent by Zorath will be relentless, and the government agents are persistent." Nikolai nodded, his eyes fixed on the road. "We'll head to the Ural Mountains. It's remote, rugged. Harder to track us there." Their journey was tense, with every stop and every new face potentially spelling danger. They avoided main roads, opting for lesser-known paths that twisted through dense forests and overgrown fields. Each evening, they found a new secluded spot to camp, never staying in one place for too long. One night, as they sat by a small fire, Ayala broke the silence. "Back on Zorath, I was taught about the hunters of my world. They are not just trackers. They are skilled in psychological warfare. They instill fear, wear down their prey." Nikolai looked at her, his face set in determination. "But one thing they may not be prepared for is human ingenuity and unpredictability. We'll need to be clever, use the terrain to our advantage." Over the next few days, they encountered a few close calls. Once, a group of men in a nondescript vehicle asked too many questions at a local supply store they visited for food. Nikolai sensed danger and quickly concocted a story about being researchers in environmental science, which seemed to satisfy their curiosity momentarily. Another time, they spotted a drone hovering silently above their makeshift campsite late at night. Acting swiftly, Ayala used a device she had fashioned to emit a short burst of electromagnetic interference, bringing the drone crashing down. "We need to be more careful," Nikolai murmured as he dismantled the disabled drone. This was too close. As they traveled, Ayala taught Nikolai more about her people's technology, sharing ideas on how to create decoys and traps if needed. Nikolai combined this knowledge with his expertise in the local geography and survival skills. Their bond strengthened with each challenge, their conversations deepening into discussions about their hopes and fears. Ayala spoke of her dreams for Zorath, a world at peace rather than one torn by conquest. Nikolai shared his visions of Earth, a planet that could teach and learn so much from others in the stars. One evening, as they sat looking at the stars, Ayala pointed towards a faint constellation. "That's where Zorath is," she said softly. Nikolai took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Maybe one day, the distance between our worlds will seem smaller than it does tonight." Despite the looming threats and the constant movement, Their journey across the wild terrains of Russia was not just an escape, but a profound sharing of worlds, thoughts, and possible futures. Each day brought new challenges, but also new understandings, forging an alliance that was their best chance at survival. After weeks of evading their pursuers, Nikolai and Ella found themselves in the rugged expanse of the Ural Mountains, where the dense forests could provide cover, but also meant a higher risk of entrapment. Nikolai chose an abandoned industrial complex as their temporary stronghold, a relic of the Soviet era. Its vast, labyrinthine structure provided plenty of hiding spots. "It's perfect," Nikolai murmured as they surveyed the area. "We can set up multiple escape routes and traps here." Ayala nodded, her eyes scanning the rusting equipment and overgrown tracks. "We can use this to our advantage. I can rig some of the old machinery to create diversions." They spent the next couple of days fortifying the complex. Ayala's knowledge of advanced technology combined with Nikolai's mechanical skills turned the place into a fortress. They installed makeshift alarms and traps, utilizing everything from old cables to repurposed mining equipment. As they worked, the gravity of their situation settled in. "We can't run forever," Ayala said one evening as they took a break. "If we're going to make a stand, this is the place." Nikolai looked at her, his expression resolute. "Then we'll make sure it counts." Their preparation was interrupted one chilly morning by the distant whir of engines, a sound they had come to dread. "They found us," Ayala said, her voice calm but firm. "It's time." Nikolai grabbed his binoculars, scanning the horizon. Through the trees, he could make out several vehicles and figures moving with tactical precision. "Looks like government agents, and they're not alone." The presence of the Zarathian bounty hunter was unmistakable, his advanced gear standing out even at a distance. They retreated to the complex, taking up positions they had prepared. Ayala activated the network of sensors and traps they had spread throughout the area. The first wave of attackers triggered a series of alarms, allowing Nikolai and Ayala to fall back to secondary positions, staying one step ahead. The battle was fierce, with the pursuers using advanced tracking equipment to try to pinpoint their location. Ayala's makeshift EMP devices proved invaluable, periodically disabling the enemy's tech and sowing confusion. Nikolai, meanwhile, used his knowledge of guerrilla tactics, leading their foes into trapped sections of the complex. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the battlefield, the tide started to turn in their favor. The attackers, disoriented by the repeated failures of their technology and the unexpected resilience of their targets, began to falter. Seeing an opportunity, Ayala suggested a risky maneuver. "If I can get to the main control room, I can amplify an EMP to knock out everything they've got. Permanently." Nikolai hesitated, knowing the danger. "It's too risky. Let's just keep—" "We may not get another chance, Nikolai," Ayala interrupted, her eyes fierce with determination. "Trust me." Nodding, Nikolai covered her as she made her way to the control room, dodging surveillance and taking out a lone guard with a swift, silent move. Inside, Ayala worked quickly, adjusting her device to the complex's old power grid. The seconds stretched into what seemed like hours as she recalibrated components. Finally, she nodded at Nikolai, who was anxiously watching the door. "Now!" she shouted. He threw the switch, and a deafening silence followed as the world around them went dark. The EMP pulse surged through the complex, incapacitating all electronic devices in its radius. As the darkness enveloped them, Nikolai and Ayala knew they had won this battle, but the war was far from over. They gathered their few belongings, ready to disappear into the night once more, their bond stronger than ever, their resolve unshaken. In the darkness following the electromagnetic pulse, Nikolai and Ayala moved stealthily, using the cover of night to their advantage. The complex, now a maze of shadows and silence, offered them one last refuge as they prepared for their final escape. "We can't stay here long. They'll regroup," Nikolai whispered, guiding Ayala through the tangled metal and concrete. His eyes, adjusted to the dim light, scanned for signs of movement. Ayala nodded, her senses alert. "We should head north, towards the lower ridges. It's rough terrain, harder to follow." They avoided using any light sources, relying instead on Ayala's enhanced vision and Nikolai's intimate knowledge of the land. As they navigated the complex's outskirts, distant sounds of confusion among their pursuers echoed through the still air. Suddenly, Ayala stopped, pulling Nikolai into the shadow of a ruined building. A small patrol, their lights flickering and unstable from the EMP, passed by mere meters away. Holding their breath, Nikolai and Ayala remained motionless until the sounds faded into the distance. Once clear, they continued their trek, moving quickly but cautiously. The weight of their journey, marked by both fear and a growing trust in each other, seemed to culminate in this final push for freedom. As dawn approached, the first hints of light revealed the rugged path that would lead them away from immediate danger. The terrain was unforgiving, but it offered a natural barrier against pursuit. Reaching the safety of a dense forest, they paused, allowing themselves a moment to rest. Ayala looked back towards the dark silhouette of the complex, its foreboding structure a stark reminder of the night's events. "We did it, Nikolai," she said softly, her voice a mix of relief and weariness. Nikolai nodded, his face grim yet hopeful. "We're not out of the woods yet, but we've bought some time." They discussed their next moves, finding a more permanent hideout, possibly in a different country, and continuing to disrupt any efforts by Ayala's people to cause harm to Earth. Their plan was bold, requiring them to stay hidden, always on the move, but together they had proven they could face remarkable odds. As they prepared to leave, Nikolai turned to Ayala, his expression serious. "Back there in the complex, you said we might not get another chance. You were right. It's not just about surviving anymore. We're in this fight together." Ayala reached out, placing her hand on his. "Together," she agreed, her determination clear. "And maybe, just maybe, we can find a way to bring peace." The sun crested the horizon, casting long golden rays through the trees. It was a new day, full of unknowns, but for the first time in a long while, Ayala and Nikolai felt a cautious optimism. They stepped forward into the light, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, united not just by circumstance, but by a shared vision of a future that held more than just survival. A future where understanding and cooperation might bridge the vast distance between worlds. As they disappeared into the landscape, the complex behind them stood silent, a testament to their resolve. The battle they had fought was just one of many to come, but it was a defining moment, one that proved their resilience and their commitment to not only defend their home, but also to protect each other.